My name is Sarah Nolette, and this is my second year in the SDM program. I have a software background, but I've spent my time at MIT applying systems thinking and design principles to the global food and agricultural system. I'm passionate about sustainability. I believe in the power of technology, and I'm concerned about climate change. For me, food is the critical touch point at which all of these issues intersect. That's, of course, why I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Neal Yanofsky. Neal has an extraordinarily impressive resume in and beyond the food industry, including as president of Panera Bread and Dunkin' Brands and CMO of Abandonment, as well as VP of Fidelity Ventures and Charette Corporation. Neal currently serves as chairman of Cheddar's Scratch Kitchen, a $600 million casual dining chain, and board member and senior advisor to Snap Kitchen, a specialty food retailer. Neal explains that while Cheddar's serves comfort food, Snap doesn't offer a single guilt-inducing option. So for Neal, the key to a balanced diet is just making sure he eats equal parts Snap and Cheddar. Neal trained in business and economics, and he loves to teach. He was formerly on the adjunct faculty at Simmons School of Management and has been a guest lecturer at a few schools that you might have heard of, like RISD, Harvard, and here at MIT Sloan. I'm leaving MIT in the spring, and I'm not sure what the next step is for me, but I'm so fortunate to get to interact and speak with talented leaders like Neal. I so enjoyed our conversation about how design can be a strategic differentiator for business, and I'm excited to hear what Neal has to say to us this morning. Please help me welcome Neal Yanofsky.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Let's face it, the restaurant industry is not renowned for being a place where all the deep systems thinkers are. In fact, our idea of a system, you've all experienced it. You're seated at the table and the server comes over and says, "Oh, is this your first time with us?" And then you give whatever answer you have, and then they say, "Let me tell you about our specials," right? That's about as far as it goes. And that's why I've been asked here to talk about design rather than systems. That and to celebrate the inaugural year of the Integrated Design and Management program. And I was really fortunate last night to meet the students in that program. And Matt Cressy has assembled an extraordinarily impressive group of very passionate, very talented people. It was a delight to meet them, and I suspect that you'll be hearing quite a bit from them. So, here's the question. Can managers contribute to design that creates competitive advantage? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. But it's a little more complicated than that because, unfortunately, not only are managers not trained to manage what's a creative process, they're actually inadvertently trained to be poor at it. So here's why. Let's go all Sloan here, right? How do managers run a project? Well, you set goals, you establish criteria, you direct the team, but very nice linear kind of process. Design creation works differently. The design process is a little bit more like this. You start with an idea. This is awesome. And then as you start working on it, you realize some of the disadvantages. It's a little bit tricky. And then you realize this stinks. I'm cleaning this up a little bit here to be professional. You can find the real language on the internet. And then, of course, since it's a personal process, you say, I stink. And then you come out of it and you say, this is awesome, right? So it's just not that nice, clear process. And when you think about it, managing design is itself almost just a contradiction in terms. It's a little bit like trying to plan spontaneity, right? Trying to manage design. And so the challenge is, how can managers support and improve a process like this, looking at the strategic goals of the company, and do that without choking the beauty out of it, and without choking off the creativity? I first got interested in this when I was working with a terrific design firm on a consumer product, and the head of the firm accused me of constantly pulling up the roses to make sure that the roots were in good shape. That is an awful criticism. I carried that with but I want to see how they're growing, right? I gotta do something to check, but you don't want to uproot them. And I found this lovely quote from the military aviator and author, Saint-Exupéry. You may know him as an author as a small child, or for your small children. He wrote a book called The Little Prince, which has an aviator in it, right? Or if you were a pretentious small child, Le Petit Prince, unless you spoke French in your household, in which case that wouldn't be pretentious. But here's what he said about managing the process. He said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. Now, I think that's really lovely. It's really poetic. It's really inspiring. However, I don't know if it's actually helpful, right? I mean, what do you do with that? I'd like to welcome you all here to the shipbuilding kickoff meeting. Our agenda today, we're going to spend the first 15 minutes yearning for the vast and endless sea. At the end of the yearning process, what do you do, right? So that's what makes this a thorny problem, and it makes you wonder, is it even worth it, right? Do we have to worry about this? So I think it's probably worth stepping back to a logically prior question, which is, can design really create competitive advantage? Which brings me to my second spoiler alert. Yeah, okay. And there are really two ways that it can do it. One is pretty well known and spoken about a lot, which is if you think about how you get benefits from a product or service you're interacting with, there's sort of a hierarchy of those benefits. And at the foundation are the basic attributes of the product, things that are functional. And those attributes lead to the functional benefits. But then above those, there's often an emotional benefit, right? A lot of things that we buy and use and love, we're getting value from them beyond just what they do, right? There's some symbolism. And then for those great products, there's even something at the apex of the pyramid that's just something bigger, something more meaningful. And a lot has been written about the power of great design to tap into that emotion and form a bond with the customer. And when you're working at that high level, not just the functional level, but the emotional level, that's where you're creating some strategic advantage, right? That's real differentiation. It's tougher for people to knock you off and take that space. But there's a second way that design creates competitive advantage, and that's the fact that great design is simply difficult. It's hard to do and do well and do consistently well. And when you're doing something that's difficult, that creates a barrier for competitors. And I want to play that out for you a little bit more. In my view, great strategies come at the intersection of three things. First, it's something that you've got to be able to do very well. But also, it has to be something that your competitors can't do well. Because if you're good at it and everyone's good at it, then that's just table stakes, right? That's just the cost of entry. Of course, everyone can do that. I once had a printer printing, well, if you must know, wedding invitations for me. And so they were important. And there was a glitch in the proof, and I asked about this, and he said, well, this is very difficult to print. And I thought, yes, but you're what? A printer. It's all you do. If it were easy, I wouldn't need you, right? So you've got to do things that you can do well and that are challenging for other folks to do well. And then, of course, most importantly on top, it's got to matter to the customer, right? If it's just some kind of peripheral thing that you freakishly are good at and no one else is good at it, but customers don't care, it doesn't matter. So great strategies come from that sweet spot in between. And what I want to talk to you about this morning is how design can get you into that little corridor in the middle there of something that you can be good at and other people can't, because you can't win the Olympics with a dive everyone can do, right? You gotta do these high degree of difficulty dives if you want to be a champion. But also, if you're doing those, you gotta nail it, right? You can't be bad at something that's difficult. That's just embarrassing. By the way, this concludes my sports metaphors for the talk. From here on in, it's humanities all the way, okay? So it's music and art from here on. So this leads to a pretty simple strategy if you want design to help you. And it's find something that's very difficult to do and do it very well. I call this the Parker strategy for competitive advantage, named after this guy, Charlie Parker. Whoop, let's back that up for a second. Charlie Parker. Now, there are actually two things you can learn in business from Charlie Parker. One is this differentiation strategy I'll tell you about. The other, if you look at the dates under his name, is that if you think that heroin use will advance your career, you're probably wrong, okay? But Charlie Parker was a great, great jazz saxophone player, and essentially, this is arguable, but essentially one of the inventors of a style of jazz called bebop. And when Charlie Parker came on the scene, jazz was mostly dominated by West Coast musicians playing a style called cool jazz. I'm going to play 15 seconds of this for you. And by the way, you're getting off easy because the IDM students last night had to listen to opera. Okay, so you can make it through 15 seconds of jazz. Here's what jazz sounded like before Charlie Parker. This is Jerry Mulligan. Well, that's nice, right? I mean, I know it's early in the morning and you're sitting down, but I know on the inside, you're all doing this, right? Okay. Here comes Charlie Parker. East Coast, African American. Sounds a little different. This is bebop. Now, neither of these are easy, right? You try getting that tone that Jerry Mulligan has, right? But if I handed you a saxophone and said, look, you got a month, you can pick either of these, I want you to come back and pick either one you want, but I want you to play it as well as you possibly can. Who's picking Jerry Mulligan? Everyone, right? You're nuts to try this, right? The drummer there was Buddy Rich for a few years, was the only person who could play with him, because they couldn't coordinate, like, where are you going and what are you doing? And by the way, it's not just coincidental. This, to me, is the really interesting part of the story. He was a brilliant guy. He was asked, late in his career, when he was like 32, why did you do this? How did you come up with it, but why? Why did you decide? And he said, I wanted a sound that was uniquely my own. And I didn't think the white boys could play this stuff. That's really what he said. He didn't say stuff, but I mean, that's what he said. So that's the Parker strategy. Find something that's difficult, that you can do well, and other people can't do. And he had a unique style. I mean, you think about that. How difficult is it in music to have a sound that other people don't have? So if you can do it in music, you certainly can do it in business and in design. So in my belief, this is particularly important when you're in an industry like, let me just pick one at random, let's say restaurants, where there are very low barriers to entry. Because if you have low barriers to entry, you sure as hell better have high barriers to success. When I was at Panera, one part of my responsibility was investor relations, dealing with mutual funds and pension funds and investment bank analysts, right, that own the stock or wrote about it. And after speaking at an investment conference at Q&A, I got a really interesting question from an investment bank analyst who I assume had just rotated in from implantable medical devices or something. Because his question was, how are you going to protect what you do so other people can't do it? Well, he had me there, right? Because, we looked into it, and it turns out we could not patent the idea of 2 slices of bread with some slices of meat in between. Can't do it, right? So we couldn't protect it with intellectual property, right, with the law. All we had was being really good at it. That's all we could do. We'd just be better at it than the next guy and actually look for things that were difficult to do. So let me give you a small example. This is not a picture of food. This is a picture of a design decision. By the way, one that was made before I got to Panera, so I take no credit for this, which is why I can boast about it. This is the most homely thing you can get right at Panera. Right? It's a bowl of soup and a side salad. But it really had a big change on the industry. What's interesting about this is not what's in the bowl, it's what's next to the bowl and the bowl, right? It's china and silver. It's not paper and plastic. And Panera, if you've been to Panera, and for God's sake, please go, I still have some stock. It works, let's be honest, on a fast food service model, right? You walk up to the counter, you order, you pick up your food at the little rugby scrum that we've arranged for you there, and then you get your elbows out and you run for a table. And the way that was always done, right, still is done in fast food, is with disposables, of course. Because you're bussing your own table, you just dump the stuff out. And Panera went to china and silver and did it for a very simple reason. It was just to upgrade the experience, and our product person there took a sandwich and put it on a paper plate and said, $6.50 overpriced. And put it on china and said, $6.50, great value. And it's really true, same sandwich. But it's not the same sandwich, right? It's just a better experience. And by the way, you've had that takeout soup in the styrofoam container with the plastic spoon. You know that sound and feeling when one hits the other, right? It's just different when you're eating it out of china, right, with a metal spoon. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is not rocket science, dude, right? You did not invent the fork, right? But the truth is, this actually was a big change, right? Going from a model where once something went across the counter, that was it. You never dealt with it again. It got thrown out. To one where you had to do terribly sophisticated stuff like bus dishes and wash them. A lot of people do this now, but it took them years. Because you have to really analyze it. Oh, wait, we have an extra busser, and how much does that cost? And then where do we put the dishwasher? And oh my gosh, there's an extra power that's required for the dishwasher. You'd be surprised, right? Now, that is a little foolish. Like, just do it better, and it'll work out. But things like this, design decisions, really can create some competitive advantage. Now, let me give you my recipe. I believe there are 7 things managers need to do. 7 things to help support design that creates competitive advantage. Unfortunately, I only know 5 of them, so I'm going to talk about the 5 I know about. Let's just start with knowing it. Now, that seems like the obvious one, the easy one. Knowing what a good result is, knowing when you have a great design. It's actually really difficult. We all think we're good at it. This is Ronald Lauder, your basic brilliant art collector, billionaire. And Ronald Lauder got his money the old-fashioned way, from his mummy. So that's his mom, Estee Lauder. You may recognize the name. So Ronald Lauder is really a fabulous collector. He's pictured here with a Gustav Klimt. You may have seen the movie about this painting. He had some spare change rattling around, picked it up for $135 million. That was the most paid for any work of art at auction ever at the time. Chump change now, 10 years later. And he was asked, how do you pick what to buy? How do you know what to collect? You're so astute. And he said, when I look at a picture, I have one of 3 reactions. I either think, oh, or oh my, or oh my God. And I buy the oh my gods, right? Now, all of us in our way think that we sort of recognize greatness when it comes to us, and we think that we're as good as Ronald Lauder is, but most of us aren't. We miss great things. And I actually want to give you an example of genius that was missed. And it's this guy. And that is Fred Astaire, right? Could we get a little volume? Because otherwise they'll hear me. Fred Astaire, you may think that this is corny and outdated and hokey, but you got to admit, for what it is, it's great. And there are things that don't show on the screen, by the way. Not only was Fred Astaire a terrific dancer, he was a great choreographer, and also he pretty much invented the way you're used to seeing dance on film now. Notice that these shots are all full body and few, if any, cuts. Right? That was Fred Astaire. It never used to be that way. So, talented guy, and you see him with a range of partners here, Ginger Rogers in black and white, Sid Charisse up there in color, and a coat rack, and he makes that look graceful. So, extraordinary guy. Well, late in his career, he obtained what's called an audition card. So you can imagine what Hollywood auditions are like, right? Tons of people. And so they have audition cards where they staple a picture of you in the day, right? Now it's done differently. And they write notes so they can remember who's who. You want to see what was on the audition card that whoever that casting manager was wrote about Fred Astaire, his first audition? Can't sing, can't act, balding, can dance a little. Oops, he sort of missed it. So it's easy, not to mention deeply pleasurable, to laugh at other people's stupidity, right? So we did that. But the truth is, the guy wasn't all that far off. Fred Astaire was not a great singer. He actually had a very limited range. Not a brilliant actor. He's in light, musical comedies, right? And I think his hairline speaks for itself in the picture. Let's call it 3 out of 4. He actually could dance more than a little, right? But we can laugh at this. But here's the thing: greatness usually doesn't come to you great. It comes to you with great potential. And so I call this some assembly required, right? For Fred Astaire, there was just something about what his screen persona was and how he sang and how he danced, and so likable. You put all of that together, and he was a tremendous movie star. Any one of those, well, not so great. And by the way, there were flaws there. So he had a limited singing range. Then they fixed that. Let's get some of the greatest songwriters of the time, the Gershwins, to write the songs for him. Maybe that'll help compensate a little bit, right? So this is really important to recognize, I think. And I'm intentionally using examples here drawn from aesthetics, right? From art and visual art and dance, because that's our challenge. Design is similar. To emphasize how difficult this is, it's not just that as managers we don't always recognize this greatness. We don't even know it as consumers often. We're very good as consumers of telling you what we wanted yesterday, not so great at telling you what we want in the future. I all the time see products, I just think it's stupid. Like, why does that exist in the world? And if you take the intersection of stuff that I think is stupid and stuff I really don't need anyway, that's junk, right? However, it also turns out that it's stuff I love. Things that I thought were stupid and thought I didn't need, okay? Allow me to illustrate junk first. Little volume.
Drafty dorm rooms. The Snuggie is machine washable, so you'll get years of warmth and comfort. Now you can use your remote, enjoy a snack, talk on the phone, do what you need to, and stay totally warm with the Snuggie.
Wow. You've invented something that allows me to talk on the phone and stay warm at the same time? That's like every item of clothing I already own, right? I mean, to me, junk, nonsense, right? And I admit, soft target, right? Kind of an easy thing to make fun of. But also things that seem to me really unnecessary are some of the best stuff. So for example, what if I told you I could do a hybrid of Wendy's and Applebee's? I'll give you almost all the time economy of Wendy's, but charge you a little bit of a premium. And I'll give you food that's like sit-down Applebee's quality, but just a little faster, right? I think a lot of people say, look, when I want fast food, I go to fast food. When I want a sit-down meal, I go there. Well, what if I called it Panera? Right? I mean, that's what Panera is. We didn't really want to say that a lot out loud, but I mean, it's really that simple. A heated steering wheel. Could you be any more spoiled in effete, right? Well, back before I moved to a sensible climate, I live in Dallas now, when I used to spend time with you people here in Boston, and frankly, I don't know what you're thinking. My wife got, the requisite Audi, right? And the package to get the heated seats, because we are not savages, right? You need the heated seats, came with a heated steering wheel. I thought that was idiotic. When it's cold, I have gloves on, right? Oh my God, do you have one in your car? Oh, go get one. It's fantastic, right? I mean, it's really great. And then my personal favorite, Silpat. Do you know what a Silpat is? Oh. So let me tell you what, I like baking. Recreationally, not at industrial scale. I've sold a few, croissants and loaves of bread over the years, but I don't mean au bon pain, Panera type baking. And this is a Silpat. It's made out of silicone. It's reusable. You put it on a cookie sheet, keeps things from sticking. Now, if I pitch this idea to you, this has been solved 5 times, right? Let's see. I can grease the, I can put butter on the pan. I can use parchment paper. If I don't have parchment paper, brown paper bag from the shopping center works just fine. I can spray Pam on it, right? I mean, there are just so many answers. But then you get the Silpat, and you bake lace cookies that are really sugary and sticky, and you take them out of the oven, and they leap off of the cookie sheet and kiss you on each cheek. It's just so wonderful. It's easy. Then you rinse it, you put it away, and it waits for you until you're in the mood to do it again. This is great stuff. But it's also at that intersection between, well, I don't really need it, and it kind of seems stupid, right? So that's the challenge, right? To know it when you see it. It's really difficult. The second one is almost as easy to dismiss. It's that you gotta want it, right? You have to really care. That's a perfect design. It offers numerous substantive improvements with no disadvantages of any kind. Said no one ever, right? It just doesn't work that way. You're always got a trade-off, right? So why do you have to want it? First, because you're giving something up to get it, right? To get great design, there's gonna be some cost. You're gonna pay for it in time, complexity, money, reputation. And the other reason is it's difficult, right? So you have to really want it just to even make the effort. Now, according to the rules of keynote speakers, this is the point where I talk about a particular company and a particular late CEO and how a monomaniacal attention to but really, what do I know about Apple, right? So I'm going to stay with something I'm more familiar with. I'm going to talk about Onion. And in particular, onion rings. Can you get more mundane? Let me show you at Cheddar's. And by the way, the closest one to here you should visit is Erie, Pennsylvania. So you'll have time to make it for lunch. This is how we serve onion rings at Cheddar's. And by the way, yeah, this is a beauty shot, but honestly, truly, they look like that. They really do when they get to the table. Now, we've taken a very, very innovative approach to the way we make onion rings. We start with an onion. We don't start with onionoid product that's frozen, and we start with an onion, and we hand slice it, and we batter it twice, and we have a beer glass, and anyone that's small enough to, big enough to drop over the beer glass, we serve, and anyone that's too small, we don't serve as onion rings. We put it in one of our other products. And then we stack them up. Now, I know, again, not rocket science, but just to put this in context for you, the average Cheddar's is serving 1,000 entrees a day. We're very high volume. Our kitchen is larger than the average American home, truly. So to do this at scale is difficult. We even throw a little parsley on it, for God's sake, right? And if you go into what's called the alley, it's in the kitchen where the window is. You've seen this in movies, right? Order Up, right? Where the chefs are putting the food. You see a huge crowd of servers, and what they have to do is wait for someone to go like this with 22 to 24 rings, right? It takes time. It takes an extra 15, 20 seconds. You have 1,000 guests. 20% of them are ordering onion rings because they're really good onion rings, right? That compounds. So the reason we do it is not because we have a technology that allows us to and no one else has figured it out. The reason we do it is we've decided it's worth it, and we're going to do the extra effort. By the way, $4.79. I'm not kidding, right? Worth the drive to Erie. Now, since I've crowed about this, let me tell you something that we do poorly and I've been unable to change. This is what a Cheddar's looks like. When you come in, you've all seen this, and this reinforced bunker area over here is where we put our youngest, least experienced, least trained person. It's generally a 16-year-old young woman who's the hostess. This has always bothered me. It bothers me because I just don't think it's welcoming, you know? There's a reason I'm standing there instead of here. There's nothing wrong with that. Because this is a talk, right? But for a restaurant, you want to be welcomed. You don't want someone bracing themselves against your onslaught. And, you know, you've seen this in almost every restaurant you go to. So last month, I went to check out a brand new fledgling chain. It's called Paul Martin's, and started on the West Coast. There are very few of them. It was started by a guy called Paul Fleming. Paul Fleming is the PF in P.F. Chang's, and he's the Fleming in Fleming's Steakhouse. And this is Paul Martin's. You'll never guess what his middle name is. And when I walked in, this is, oh, I'm sorry, there, I pointed to that. When I walked in, this is what I saw. Now, cell phones and narcissism have been a tremendous boon to those of us in restaurants and retail, because we used to have to go in with cameras, you know, and do that thing where you say, here, stand here, I'll pretend I'm taking a picture of you. I got the menu, you know. Heavy industrial espionage. And now you can just go with your phone, you take pictures. But I'm still a little shy about it, which is why I have chairs in the foreground. But the Mr. Blurry Man there on the right is where you come in, and there's the hostess, and that's the hostess desk. They turned it sideways. That's simple. And lowered it. That's nice. Think of how that feels. Let's compare and contrast, right? I mean, the kind of thing that you expect to hear on the left here, right? It's not. I'm not ready for a nice dinner now, right? On the right, it's very simple. I'm convinced that the height of that wall behind her was thought about. That's how you do in height, right? I mean, they really got that right. So let's do that. How hard can it be? Well, it's really hard. Here's why. First, you have to think of it. Fortunately, I skipped that step. I can steal it from someone else. So I got that one done. Then you have to care. Oh my God, we have so much stuff going on. Do I want to be banging on changing this, right? Just bandwidth, just attention. And then, while to me it seems obvious and it's better, I actually know that that's not the case. If I floated this, people would not nastily, not aggressively, not small-mindedly, but intelligently, based on their area of expertise, functionally within the company, would say, look, this is expensive to change. We've got to rip it out. We've got to rebuild. The desk is always going to look messy. You know, at least you have some, you know, visual protection, right, when you have that lectern. Where do we put our pagers? Because we're so proud of the fact that, you know, we have people waiting all the time. We somehow think that's a good thing. You know, where do we put those? Oh, there's no power on that back wall. Where do we charge the pagers? It'll block traffic back and forth. And our inexperienced 16-year-old will feel awkward and exposed and not have something to have a death grip on. These are all legitimate concerns. And the only way you get past that to get to great design is someone saying, great point, let's do it anyway. Right? Let's overcome those or live with them. So that's why I say you have to want it. And there's a big difference between saying I'm just wishing for something and I'll actually pay for it, right? But here's the thing. We really know the difference in our own behavior. So a few months ago, my wife and I went out to dinner with some friends. And we're having a nice dinner, and one friend asked kind of a fun, slightly provocative question, which was, if you could have some talent that you don't have, right? What would you want it to be? And by the way, none of this fly, be invisible, play shortstop for the Red Sox, right? Not fantasy stuff, just something within reach, right? And people went around and talked about it, and one person said they wish they were, you know, sort of a decent cook, you know, they could cook better, and someone else wanted to get what's it called, the flip turn that you do when you're swimming, right? They wanted to be able to do that. They never, you know, they like swimming, couldn't do that. I said, I'd like to be able to play piano. not Carnegie Hall piano, but like, just second-rate piano bar piano, just capably. And by the way, this wasn't played better. I've never taken a lesson. I don't know how to play. So we're driving home, and Susan turns to me very thoughtfully and says, Margaret, our daughter's fabulous piano teacher, Margaret takes adult students. You could do this if you want. Well, I didn't say I wanted to learn piano. I said I wanted to know piano, right? I don't want to work. That's different. It was a hypothetical contrary to fact. What would you like, right? So that's when you know the difference. See how you act, right? So anyone can put a hostess stand wherever they want, and anyone can do onion rings however they want, right? What do you choose to do? Where do you put your effort? So that takes us to want it. Next, improve it. Aren't we all great at that? I have just a few thoughts for you, right? So the first thing is make sure you know the difference between improving and improving, right? Are you really helping? It's very tough when you're not a designer, right, to help improve design. You're not trained for it. And watch out for this. Here's how to kill great creative work. Just 4 words. Why don't you just? And then your suggestion follows. If you're not clear why, let me rephrase it for you. Clearly, you haven't thought this through. Fortunately, it's obvious to me. And therefore, why don't you do this simple thing that must have escaped you? Because we all love being talked to that way, don't we? Right? The truth is, that's how we approach a lot of stuff, right? Manet, great impressionist painter, said, painting is easy when you don't know how, but very difficult when you do. That is a truth. And some of you, I know I have, may have been stuck behind some knucklehead in a museum who looks at this and says, what? My 6-year-old could do that, right? So this isn't really necessary for the purpose of the talk, but it is necessary for my psychic well-being. I've been holding this in for too long. Here's the answer. 1, no, she can't. And B, even if she could, she hasn't, has she? Right? So let's give a little credit for the idea, not just the execution. And I think that we really undervalue ideas, particularly as managers who are all about getting stuff done, right? We focus so much on execution. Now, this is not just a problem for people who don't care for Jackson Pollock or abstract expressionism. If you're a skilled manager, almost by definition, right, unless you're very unusual, you're probably not a great designer. And it's very difficult to improve on things that we can't do ourselves. Very difficult to add value to things that we can't do ourselves. But here's the catch. That's adding value to something you can't do yourself is kind of the definition of managing, right? I mean, I've had IT people report to me, right? HR people, right? As a manager, you got to be kind of a general manager, broadband, right? And those of you who have not yet managed people outside of your area of expertise probably will at some point. And it's difficult. So my advice to you is start with some humility. Make sure you're really improving. My subsidiary advice is if you can't manage that, if you can't swing the humility thing, then start with some science. There's a very dangerous cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's great because it's about incompetent people, so we all have some experience with this. And the Dunning-Kruger effect starts from noticing that if you don't have the skills to do something, you may not have the skills to recognize it. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect says that incompetent people don't know that they lack the skill, which is why a lot of the articles written about this are called things like, we are all happy idiots, right? So they don't know that they lack the skill, and they don't recognize it in others, right? Now, if you have a specialized skill, particularly a creative one, you've probably encountered this. It's the why don't you just? People don't realize that they're not good at it, and they don't realize that you actually offer something special. They think they're inventing something new that you've never thought about. And by the way, I've taken the liberty to add a corollary to this. It's the Yanofsky Reminder, which is, this does not apply to everyone except me, right? It applies to me too. It might even apply to you, right? So, by the way, if you're interested, I have a bit.ly address. It's bit.ly/ it even applies at MIT, and that'll bring you to some more information on the Dunning-Kruger effect. So improving it is hard, and so I'm going to lower the bar here a little bit. At a minimum, don't unimprove it, right? Hi, I'm here to help, right? That just makes people's blood run cold, doesn't it? Don't make it worse. And seriously, sometimes just keeping your hands off and your mouth shut is some brilliant work as a manager. You know the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take. And what's the first principle of it? Do no harm. Good to know. One of the reasons that you need to protect it is from the unimprovement people. So that's number 4, is you have to protect it. At the risk of sounding superficially cynical, it's surprisingly common that when someone comes up with some great design, very smart people line up to water it down. This brings me to the example related to the onion rings. Why, look, it's Panera Bread. By the way, little inside joke for me, I took this picture the other day. You see this up here with that thing hanging out, right? Panera Bread is a wonderful company. I loved being there. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had. However, it's a real pleasure to walk in to take a picture and see this and think, wow, I don't know who has to worry about that, but it's not me. Right? So I just thought I'd bask in that for a minute since I'm showing you a picture about the wonderful design of the restaurants, right? But part of what made Panera a success is getting up on that period of emotional benefits, and part of that was from a nice environment. You know, comfy chairs, fireplaces, all that. Well, like clockwork, around once a year, some very smart restaurant consultant would find his way to me and conspiratorially lean across my desk and say, you know, I see that you max out at lunch. You know, all your seats are full. And I can show you how you can get 20% more seats into your restaurant. That's enticing. Well, but I knew damn well how to get 20% more seats in the restaurant. Rip out the booths. Very space inefficient, right? It's very simple. You just make it look like a military mess hall, right? You line up the two tops, as they're called, because it's a top that seats two. And you're done, right? It's no mystery how to get more in. He thought we were knuckleheads. We weren't. We wanted to do this because we thought that if we had a better environment that wasn't just, you know, functional and transactional, people would want to come and linger. And that what we would lose at lunch by maxing out on seating capacity, we'd gain at breakfast, at 3 in the afternoon, at 10 in the morning, those in-between dead periods that were not dead for Panera, right? Everyone's there on Wi-Fi. And do you know why we knew that? Because we just sort of believed it. We really believed it. We couldn't prove it because if we changed it and changed the seating, the sales would go up instantly. There was no question. We're at physical capacity. We would increase our capacity. Sales would go up. But we really believed, couldn't prove it, but really deeply believed that we gained more by having a wonderful design, a place people wanted to be, and didn't want to denigrate that, didn't want to reduce that, and then have the issue of people saying, you know, it's just not as good as it used to be. A lot of people sell turkey sandwiches, maybe I'll go somewhere else. This is an example, but it actually happens really broadly. So imagine that you're doing a redesign of a product or a new introduction, and you have some outcomes that are immediate and some are distant, and then some are you know for sure, and others are less certain, and you can just kind of reel them off and put them on there, right? So you have some startup costs; those are going to happen right away. That's why they're called startup costs, right? Or maybe changeover costs, right? And you know what those are. You know those are going to happen. And kind of out at the other end, there may be some brand building effect, like my example of Panera seating, but that's uncertain and it's going to happen over time. And you may get more affiliation, loyalty of your customers. You may recruit new customers, and so on, right? You may lose some. Well, when you look at the pattern here, a lot of the things that are immediate and you know you're getting them are the costs. And look at that. The things that we're not so sure of and they're distant are the benefits. That's why this is tough. Because the costs you have right in your face and you know about them, and the other stuff you just have to believe very often. we've all heard it. We've all said it. That's why we've got to protect, right? Because sometimes just those little things are very often saying, if we can just make this less scary to me, more conventional, more like what other people have already been doing for 15 years, if we just do that little thing, then I'm good with it, right? One of the other companies I work with is called Snap Kitchen. It's a fabulous place. We serve food like this, and very, very healthy stuff, as Sarah mentioned in her intro. So if you're someone like me, you just want to eat a little better, it's a playground. Get anything you want. It's all good. No bad decisions. It's calorie controlled. Everything's delicious. If you're on a particular diet regimen, though, if you're eating paleo because you don't care about science, or low glycemic index. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Low glycemic index, or Whole30, or you're vegan. There are wonderful choices for you. We don't have the sad little vegetable plate at the end for you vegans, right? I mean, really terrific choices. One thing, though, is that the way we serve it is like this. It's all prepared in a central kitchen. Our stores are grab and go. They're not restaurants. They're convenience stores. This is what the packaging looks like. And by the way, that is not a low-resolution picture. We're operating the last dot matrix printer in America, I believe. That's actually what our labels look like. I wanted to be deep into a talk about good design before I showed you that. So, and the stores, by the way, look like that. Now, here's the good news. We do sales per square foot that exceeds any other retailer I've been able to find other than the Apple Store and Tiffany. Someone out there is doing better than us, but right. So that's, as we say in the retail business, good, right? So I mean, these are really productive stores. They're very successful. At the same time, a lot of people are piling into this business, right? We're little. When I started with the company 18 months ago, we had 11 stores. We're up at almost 40 after a year and a half, so we're growing very, very quickly. The company was started in Austin. That'll shock you. And we're also in Houston, Dallas, Chicago, coming to Philadelphia at the end of the year, then Washington, D.C. Then our international strategy starts with Boston and New York. These are tough places. I mean, I love Boston, but why do we hate new stuff here so much? It's so tough to develop. In Dallas, everyone says, that's a great idea, let's build a highway, and then like a week later, it's done. It's really remarkable. So we want to upgrade this. So this is a really interesting question, right? It's right at the edge of whether you improve it or protect it. It's working so well, but we think we can do better. And it's really difficult to change something that's successful. Which then leads us to the last one, abandon it. Some things may be great designs, but you got to give them up. Here's a product I was partially responsible for. This was an investment of mine when I was at Fidelity in the venture capital business. Yeah, you're killing me. It's a toothbrush, and it brushes all three surfaces of your tooth at the same time. Oh, don't laugh. I mean, so they were fairly high. There was an expression at the time. It takes $4 million to train a venture capitalist. That didn't mean classroom time. That meant the money you lose on bad investments before you smarten up a little bit. This was about 60% of my training, right? But it really was a great product. I used it for years after we lost all of our money and it was discontinued, because there were some lying around. It was terrific, but there got to be a point where we said, it's not working, and we pulled the plug. That was difficult, but it was easy. And it was easy because it really wasn't working, And so, the company wasn't selling enough. They were losing money. I hate when that happens, right? I mean, that can only happen for so long, right? When it really gets difficult on the abandonment question is when you have something that's terrific. Now, this is one of the early IBM ThinkPads, 1996. So, in technology terms, this was just after the Earth's crust cooled, right? I mean, this was a long time ago, right? But it had a genius design. Some of you may know this one. I'm going to show you a 15-second TV spot about it. Volume, please.
The trouble with most notebooks this size is that most hands are this size. That's why we created the 4.5-pound ThinkPad 701 and gave it a price that makes it easy to get your hands on one.
Isn't that wonderful? And by the way, just the whooshy, clicky sound, I mean, it was really tactile and terrific. And a big seller. And they never did a follow-up. Do you know why? Well, state-of-the-art was a 10-inch screen. That's the problem, right? By the time they were ready for the next generation, people were doing 12-inch screens. Now the problem went away. It may seem obvious, but I guarantee you if I were there, I'd be, you love it when you do something that was so good. I'd be saying, oh, good, now we can do one with a 10 keypad on the side that's 14 inches when you open it, right? I mean, find a way to use that, because can you imagine how much time and effort and engineering and sweat and, money it took to develop that? One product, goodbye, right? And they were smart. They didn't keep trying to stretch it out. So these are the 5. The astute listener might notice that those 2 are exactly the opposite. And that's a little tricky. So I take my advice here from the 1930s movie comic W.C. Fields, who had this bit of inspiration. He said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Then quit. No sense being a damn fool about it. And I really think that that's true, right? You got to know when to give up. Right? And we're all trained to never give up, right? Keep going. But, at a certain point, that just becomes dumb. And I really think that folks who can admit the flaws in something are rock stars. I'm involved with a company that's doing a major transformation, a restaurant company, of how they operate. And they're changing the kitchen equipment, and that means that they have to change the recipes and then the labor model, and then they have to rebalance production, and that changes how they manage. That's what's called the heart of the house. You folks might call it a kitchen. In the front of the house, right, where the servers are, they're going to a system with runners to assist the servers, and that means that they need headsets and seating technology to optimize that, new scheduling, and that changes the management model. And at a board meeting, one of the board members asked the CEO, said, well, boy, this seems really complicated. You're spinning a lot of dials at once. Because that's the kind of value add you get from your board members like me. And, as I said that, you're forming up your answer as CEO in your head, right? You know how it goes. Yes, we're aware of that, but we're doing this and doing that and testing and training and and everything's going to be fine, right? And the CEO said something that I just loved. When all else fails, fall back on telling the truth. It usually serves you well. And he said, oh, you don't know the half of it. Right? I mean, this is tremendously risky. I think that a lot of these things just won't work. I mean, we believe in it, we're testing it, but I mean, this is just so interrelated, we don't even know which things are worthwhile and which aren't. It'll take us a while to just figure out what we like, let alone what we can do. That was brilliant. And one of the reasons it was brilliant was the senior management team was in the room. And I think what they heard was, you now have permission to mess around with this, take some chances. It doesn't all have to work perfectly. This is a minor hero of mine, Maria di Villota. She was a test driver and a Formula One race car driver. Now, Formula One is like soccer. Huge sport everywhere but in the United States. Seriously. If your team spends $500 million a year, you got a little team that probably isn't going to make it, right? Very high stakes. It's tough, it's macho, it's male-dominated. She was the first woman driver in 20 years. And that makes her one, literally, of a few dozen people in the world who can do this job. She was in a horrific crash. Terrible. Her skull was crushed. She lost an eye. Multiple operations. And she survived. Ended up dying from complications. It's a very sad story. But she was a very public figure and beloved in Spain, where Formula One is very big. And after many months of surgeries and rehab, she held a press conference. Now, get a mental image of what someone looks like in that situation, okay? Let me show you what Maria di Villota looked like. Yes, that is a crushed blue velvet eye patch that matches her blazer. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about this woman's appearance. I'm talking about her attitude. You know, there were flaws, right? She embraced them. And I think that if you're clear about what the flaws are, then abandonment isn't embarrassing. When the time comes for it, it's smart. And if you're hung up around whether you should abandon or improve or protect, remember that being open to the shortcomings is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. I don't know this person. Didn't know this person. But this is not a weak individual. She is badass, right? I mean, it's the only word you can use to describe, right? And if strong people like her can do this, that's how you get to the point where you decide to abandon. Now, that's a sad story. I wanted to end with something sort of uplifting and inspiring. And I thought I could find a great quote from the Dalai Lama. But I was wrong, I couldn't. But I do have one from the Dolly Parton. And I know you're laughing because of her rather ridiculous appearance. But I wish upon each of you that you have even half of the business savvy and business success that Dolly Parton has had. Fabulous business person, fabulous songwriter, unusual performer. And she was asked, are you offended by dumb blonde jokes? And she said, no, because I know I'm not dumb. And I also know I'm not blonde. So that's what you need to do this. You need that perfect combination. Yeah, isn't that great? You can live by those words, right? That combination of confidence and self-awareness. Know the flaws, go ahead anyway. Thanks very much.